All right, so let's get started with this class. What we're talking about today is a type of trading ISK making activity that I call lazy importing, because you put in only very few work and get quite some nice ISK out of it. So for me, I do an import run maybe every 3 or 4 weeks, depending on how I feel like. And on that run, I try to find as many market opportunities as possible, rush them all in, put it all on the market, and then basically forget about it. So I lock in a couple billion ISK on the market, and those tend then to slowly sell off over time. Some items sell faster, some items sell slower. When the faster ones sell out, you can do a repeat and continue making some more ISK that way. We'll be looking at that full cycle today, how you can find market opportunities, how you can then get your stuff in, what opportunities you have for holding, and some very small tips on then selling the items. So the first part is pretty much the most important one, the one about finding market opportunities. What you want to find out is which items will be able to sell in a decent amount of time. So with decent amount of time, that depends on you. If you only have 100 million ISK and you want to quadruple that within a week, you're going to have more imports, where maybe ammo makes more sense. If you just have way too much ISK and you don't really care about how fast it sells, then you might be looking at more expensive, maybe also some faction modules. For example, like Caldari, maybe Warp Scrambler, which are used in niche situations and which are super expensive, so not many people are going to buy it. That's something you have to put a bit of research in to figure out what you want to sell and what kind of time horizon you want to look at. Personally, I've been importing both. So I've been just going through the alliance doctrines, seeing what is missing, and then just import a bunch, which includes more expensive, slow-moving items, and some cheaper, fast-moving items. When you're looking for market opportunities, one source you can go for is the Killboard, and there you'll have the opportunity to look for Brave Collective and then select the losses, and you can go through those things and figure out what items people usually use. One of them probably will be Damage Control 2. Many people might have that idea to import Damage Control 2, so I recommend you also check the local markets. How many items are there? What price are they sold at? And how does that price compare to your source where you get the items from? Source could be either some buybacks that you might be able to sneak some items from at rather lower rates, or just some high-sec markets like Jita, Amar, Rents, or Heck. Personally, I prefer shopping in Jita. We'll look into why in a minute later. What you can also have a look is channels like Lobby and Indie Bros Public. Sometimes we get pings in Indie Bros when a certain doctrine or ships completely run out. In that moment, you'll see a little gold rush where many people are trying to import it, put it all on the market, and then it might sell over time until the next hole appears, the next ping goes out, and continue that way. You can use that moment either to join in on the gold rush and try to get it up first, or you take the slow approach, you write it down on a note, and you import it a couple days later to then later hit the hole when the market runs dry. Otherwise, if you're just trying to figure out what to import, if you're rather new to this, just ask on Slack. People will help you figure out a bit what things you can import, where you can have a nice start. Just don't expect them to give away their billion ISK making super secrets. You'll have to figure that out yourself. And there's another tool I'll look into with you now, which is called Eve Market Watch. I'll link that in Dojo Slack as well. All right, so here's a link. That's a little tool I built, which has the purpose of getting notified when items run out, so you can then seize on a market opportunity, which gets together with that first point, the find market opportunity. That's how the tool looks like. That's my private list where I selected some items, put in some quantities to figure out when the market orders I put up are running low and I should do another supply run. But where you can start is to go to the Alliance tab. That would be right over here. And on that page, we have kind of a Wiki Export, which takes the fittings from our Brave Wiki and then populates a huge list in here. So with some items, you might see, okay, maybe I don't need 50, I don't need to actually have 200 of those 50 mm quad lifts on market. So take those numbers you see here with some grain of salt, but it should give you some indication of to see if an item is going to run low and if there might be a market opportunity. So what we see here, for example, there are the export tooling said, okay, we should have 30 basilisks on market in PCMA, which might not be so good. So don't just try to rush in 30 basilisks. They'll take some time to sell off because the basilisk itself is a T2 logi ship, which doesn't die so often and is rather expensive. So what you can do here is to click on that item. And it will show you some details comparing that local hub you selected with JITA stats. So what we'll see here, we've selected a sell order where there are currently 4 basilisks on the local market, which, for example, in PCMA. And you'll see a little thing called days remaining. We'll look into that in a minute when we have a better example. So the local price currently shows that they are sold locally for 250 million, and in JITA they are sold for 260 million. So in here, take that with a bit of caution. You don't want to just import it from JITA and then realize, hey, there are like 20 basilisks already on the market at below JITA. At that point, think about if you want to import it for the long haul, how long the local items need to sell off, and then price it up. Personally, I would go here with the JITA sell price, buy maybe 5 ones of them in JITA, and put them on the market in here for 300 million. That way I'm supposed to make about 30 million is per piece, which would be roughly 10%. And then just wait until the others who are at 250 million eventually sell off. So if you have some time with that, if you don't need your ISK straight away again, I can suggest going for that long haul again. So let's pick out another example where we might have some better stats. All right, this one looks better. Here we wanted to look at the days remaining field. On the right-hand side, you see a little graph of the recent market stocks, because the tool runs a few times each day to see how many items are currently stocked and then plots a graph from that. So with every item, you'll see a trend that it goes up really fast because someone stocked like 100 items, and then it trickles down slowly, and then it goes up again, and then it trickles down slowly. And what the days remaining field here does is to average out the trend and then try to predict in how many days the market will run dry. That's a good information for you, because if you say, okay, I'm planning on maybe doing an import run in a week, you can go for items that are a bit less than 7 days or maybe 14 days. And then import a bunch, and you'll be able to hit some pretty good market holes where you can ramp up your prices. I wouldn't suggest going with our 10-minute afterburners if you have a local price of 5 million, then ramping it up to 10 million, because some people will then say, hey, I'm not gonna buy this at that price. But play a bit around with it. Don't be shy on ramping up prices. So you don't want to buy things locally and resell them for a high price, but when you do some importing, it's a game you can try out. Just try to find that sweet spot where you make some nice ISK to expand your importing business while not totally screwing people locally. All right, so we've been talking a bit about finding market opportunities. We've been looking at Zkill, Asking, and Slack, and this one handy tool. You'll have the link to that in Dojo Slack, and for the video on demand later, I'll put it on screen. All right, so the good thing is with this tool here, you can also create your own little item watches, which you can see, which helps you remember what items you were looking at and which you want to continue importing. This tool will help you by sending emails if you allow it, or just showing you a list that you can go into like every 2 or 3 weeks, see if some items are running low, and then re-import those. Cool. So we've been looking at market opportunities, how to find them, and how to remember them. The next step then would be to actually build a shopping list. As I've mentioned before, always check the local markets that you want to import items to. So if you're about to import, let's say 5 basilisks, because you've seen on the tool that there are only 4 left and they're supposed to be 30, I suggest going into the local market, open up the market browser, search for the basilisk, and get a bit of feeling for how well it's been moving in the last, let's say, 30 days. You'll have some information in-game, which I forgot to open before that. And it'll show you how well they've been moving, what price they've been moving at, so you can figure out if it's a worthy import for you. If you then see that someone else already put up another 10 basilisks before my tool or any other source that you were using has been able to pick it up, then you can also reconsider maybe postponing that basilisk and going for something else instead. It should also help you get a feeling of how the prices in your current region are looking like, because, for example, if you're stocking PCMA and thinking, okay, I might get a basilisk here sold for 300 million because the other ones are only 250 million, you might realize that in a system next door, with host name I forgot to remember, that they are another 20 up for, let's say, 260 million. So just check the local market, don't limit it to just your system, but check the region to get a good feeling of at what price it is sold locally and what you might be able to make from it. However, if you're doing an import run for 100 different items, you can skip on some. So I'd suggest go for the ones that you suspect will be moving slowly and broaden it a bit depending on how much you are actually importing. And based on your budget, then you can say, okay, for example, if I have 1 billion ready, I'm not going to import 20 basilisks because then I would be putting all my ISK into one bucket. Rather, in that moment, build yourself a list of market opportunities and then pick out a few here, pick out a few there. And if it's your first import run, I'd suggest go with like 10 items. Pick out 10 items from different areas like some ammo, some scanning modules, some mining modules, some drones. And cover a few areas. Some items might sell better in war times, other might sell better in peace times. So diversify a bit there. Some items of them will sell faster. You can then re-import them again, while the others are just gonna stay there, keep selling. Yep. So that's been it for talking about figuring out a shopping list. Next thing would be then to actually buy it. As we've been talking about it a bit earlier, you have a couple of sources where you can get items from. One thing is buybacks. Most of them have some public channels. You can ask them, hey, do you maybe have 100 damage controls ready that I can sell off from you at a price like maybe cheater split? So you can even save on the hoarding costs as well. If they don't have them ready, you can also propose making a little business deal, because usually they either export them to HiSec or do something locally with them. And if they get paid for just handing you over the items, that's a nice thing as well. Another thing you can do is to do some nullsec regional trading. For example, buy items in GE Tech 8GV and then sell them for profit or markup in PCMA. Those are things you can do. Just don't buy things in GE and relist them for a higher price. That would be considered a not so nice move. Another thing, you probably already guessed it before, is importing from HiSec, where you get all the different items. Some might be more expensive to haul in if they're super huge. Like you don't want to try to haul in an Orca by having someone haul it in from Jita to Mandori and then have BLT jump it in. If you're just starting out, I'd suggest stay away from shipouts. Those get rather big and rather expensive to import, and go for modules, ammo, and that kind of stuff. Module, ammo, drones. If you decided to buy your things from HiSec, you can do everything just with one char. If you have a slower cycle, for example, if you're only importing every 2, 3, 4 weeks, you can do a run up to HiSec, buy your stuff, and come back down here. You don't really need to travel there. You can also use jump clones. But if you have an alt ready, that makes things easier for you, because if you have that alt on a different account, you can open up both jars at the same time and then go through your shopping list item by item, open it up in Jita, see how the price is, compare it with the price locally, and then decide if you want to buy that batch or continue. All right, that's about talking about buying it in HiSec. If you bought something in HiSec, you have to look into hauling it down as well. My personal approach is to use public couriers down to Mandori and then to use a friend's or mine jump freighter, which is the most efficient way because you have to pay the less. You, however, have to train up some skills and actually own a jump freighter. But don't worry, at that point, we'll look into other opportunities for you as well. There is also the opportunity to use Trinity X or short TXI to do the HiSec hauling. I'm not sure about their rates yet, but with public couriers, I had also a rather solid experience and usually only pay them about 1% of the collateral I'm looking to haul. So for example, if I'm putting up a courier with, let's say, 10K cubic meters, that is worth 2 billion, I usually put in a reward of 20 million, and usually that moves within a day or two. You can go lower than that 1%, just fiddle a bit around with it, see how fast it needs to go for you to make sense. And for me personally, it didn't really matter if I shopped it in Amar or Jita, looking at the hauling fees. If you shop in Amar, you might be looking at higher prices than in Jita. If you're just starting out, I suggest just go for Jita, you'll get everything there. And after some time, if you, for example, find out that the Acolyte 2 drone is sold a lot and you could make a profit by getting it from Better Hub, you can start putting up buy orders in Amar to capitalize more on lower prices there. Sell prices might be higher in other hubs than Jita, so that's why I suggest starting out with Jita first. So you have a lot of nuances where you can then optimize your gameplay later. All right, so that was about hauling it from a HiSec hub to Mandori. Mandori is the staging ground for our jump freighters, where we jump it from HiSec down into nullsec. BLT, which is Brave Little Toasters, our Brave jump freighter service, also services Amar. So you don't have to do the part from Amar to Mandori with your own hauler or with public couriers, but you're looking at a little bit higher import fee. So again, as said before, build yourself a shopping list, check BLT, check the public couriers, and try to get a bit of feeling of how much you're paying to get it in and how much you will be looking at making as a profit. Usually, if you don't completely fuck something up, you'll be good. But I suggest that over time, as you get more experience with it, you look at optimizing your things a bit. About hauling it in, there are a couple ways you can do that. If you have very small packages, like up to 100 cubic meters or so, you can look at hauling it in with interceptors, for example. Let's say if you're selling blueprints locally or some very small ammo. You can train yourself into a jump freighter. That takes a rather long time and big investment though. And there are some other opportunities like using BLT or just asking in Indie Bros or hauling if someone is doing an import run anyway and trying to get a better rate with them. And if you're finding someone who is just doing a jump freighter run and willing to take your stuff, talk to them regularly. Maybe you'll be able to get a better deal by just putting up a hauling order to them and they can pick it up whenever they want to so that you're able to get a bit lower rate. That starts to make really lots of sense when you import billions worth of stuff, because BLT rates will then cost you a little bit ISK that you might prefer to keep yourself. So there are a couple of ways that you can go through each of these steps. And at the end, you have it at your respective market, which could be GE or PCMA or any of the other hubs. And then you'll want to look at selling it. As we said before, don't be shy about marking up your items. Maybe go for 30% markup or 50% markup in the beginning, and then adjust as you see how well your item sells. Don't go for a 10,000% markup at the beginning, because it might cost you a lot then in terms of broker fees. For selling it, make sure you train up some market orders. There are some skills like retail or trading that will help you put up more market orders. I think you start with 5 or 10 market orders in the beginning that you can use, but getting it up to 10 or 20 is a rather fast skill. It's done rather fast in looking at the skill queue. So at that point, you'll be able to maintain 20, 30 market orders. So you'll have some opportunity to diversify and maybe also stock a couple more markets than just one. And then when we're here at the sell part, you've put up your market orders. That's the point where the lazy part comes in. So before those 5 steps, that is a bit of work. You'll be looking at that at regular intervals, like every 3 or 4 weeks. But you can also do it a couple days over a weekend and then just forget about it for, let's say, 2 or 3 months. Just remember that your market orders will run out after 90 days and then will be brought back to your item hanger, at which point you will also kind of lose your broker fees. So if you're going for the full put it up and forget it approach, then I suggest put yourself a reminder at 70 days that you go through your market orders and at least update them a little bit, like change the ISK price by 0.01 ISK to reset that expiry timer. Yep, and at that point, you'll be just sitting back, letting things sell off. You can decide yourself if you want to check the items regularly, if you want to log in every day to play some station games, or if you're just going to let it sit there and check in every 1 or 2 weeks, which is my favorite approach because you're not selling. In the local markets we have here in NullSec, there's not so much turnover like in high-sec hubs that you need to update your market orders every 5 to 10 minutes. In my experience, it's totally sufficient to do that every 1 or 2 weeks. All right. That was most of it for now. I'll be looking through my notes if I forgot anything. And that right now is also a good moment for you to put in questions in Slack. One thing I forgot. There's also skills for reducing the sales fees. I think you can't reduce the broker fees in player-owned stations. But there are some skills that you can train up over time That will, on the one hand, give you more opportunities to diversify, and on the other hand, give you some opportunities to cut even out some more margin over time. All right, no, I think that's pretty much it. So we have this circle here. You're looking for market opportunities. You'll note them down somewhere. Then you're going to shop it, you'll import it, and then you'll sell it. And at any time, as often as you want, you can go through that loop again, find new market opportunities, or just go back to the ones you already did. All right, I think that answered Salkido's question about recommended skills, which are market slots for having more market orders and eventually reducing your sales fees a bit.
I would also add that good recommended skills are getting your high-sec G alt into T2 and industrials, and you can save money on the shipping that way as well if you have Insta-Unbox and Jita.
Yes, that's a thing you can do as well. For example, trade into a deep space transport, a blockade runner, or a freighter. However, in my experience, when I'm doing an import run, I'm usually doing a 3 to 4 billion package. And at that point, I would be only looking at a 30 million for importing that in terms of high-sec fees, which I would be able to save by having my own deep space transport or blockade runner. And in order to make that 30 million back, you'll then have to travel about 20 jumps. When you look at that 3 billion and put up, let's say, you're looking at a 30% margin would be what would be really nice if you get that. 20%, 10% still makes sense in that case. You're looking at way more profit compared to that small part for the hauling. So it is something you can do to help you, but it's not going to be a huge benefit in terms of your importing. Also, you'll be putting up, I think, 200 or 300 million for those ships, which you could also use to import. My biggest suggestion is just piggyback on top of other people who are doing import and export runs anyway, and to abuse public couriers with low rates as possible as you can go. All right, Sakida, what amount did I invest on my first run? I don't really recall that one because it's been a long time, but you can start well with like 100 or 200 million. That's a good thing you can start off with. Currently, I'm doing import runs every month that go up to 10 billion per run.
So, Keto, I started with 400 million, and that was about 4 months ago. And I too do about 5 to 10 billion imports now.
So it goes up pretty fast. All right, there's another question. Could the tool, I assume Eve MarketWatch, also be used for detecting overpriced items? We have some items that are technically stocked but strongly overpriced, so you can still make IS by importing them. Yes, that feature is on our to-do list. It will be available over the next weeks, so just keep an eye on Eve MarketWatch. Maybe just sign up and we'll push out a feature update then. All right, so we had another question from Catastrophe. Assume I have to be there to check markets, or is there a tool? It is better if you're there locally because you have the most up-to-date information. But there are other tools like Eve Marketeer that will also let you browse through the market in your web browser. And I didn't understand the other part with the market orders, setting that up from wormhole space. Maybe you can reformulate that question. All right, so we had another question from Eleanor. Is it worth it buying a jump freighter? I already have alts that can fly them. I would say if you have 10 billion ISK that you don't really need right now, then go for it, because you'll be able to sell it off for roughly the same price sometime soon. or sometime later. It's up to you. If you'll be spending 10 billion on a jump freighter and then only have 1 or 2 billion left, I'd suggest going with putting maybe 6 or 7 billion in an import run first and letting that sit there. Jump freighters make sense if you can also then use some BLT contracts to supplement your imports. But you're looking for a jump freighter run from Mindori to GE and back. Currently, you're looking at a 80 to 100 million in fuel alone. So at that point, I would suggest ask around if someone is doing an import run anyway. And if you only have like 5 to 10K cubic meters, that won't put a dent into the jump freighter because they have cargoes of up to 300K cubic meter or 350 with the Raya. All right, another question from Catastrophe. I have to be in a certain range to create the order, if I remember correctly. I can't set up an order without a char in this range, correct? I think that's correct. So there are skills that help you modify orders from range. You'll start out at pretty much only within the same system or same station. Over time, you can expand that a bit, which might make sense, for example, if you are in GE and you want to also update buy orders in PCMA and UQ VWD. So we have another question about the jump freighter hauls and the rates there. For jump freighter hauls, there's a tool, I think it's freight.bravecollective.com, where you can put in the collateral of your items, so how much are they worth, and the volume, and it will then spit you out the BLT rate to get it in. If you're working with other people where you can piggyback on the runs they're doing anyway, you'll be able to go decently below that BLT rate. And as we've been talking before, 1% of the collateral is a good rule of thumb for high sec. Over time, as you get some more experience with how fast the items move, you can also drop that down to like 0.5%. So 0.5%, that would be a 10 million ISK fee when you're importing a 2 billion worth run. So not really much on that side. Any more questions at this point?
And finding people in hauling channel to piggyback off of can save you a lot of risk. My last run was about 10,000 meters cubed and 10 billion in collateral, and BLT would have charged $500 million for that, and I was able to find someone to piggyback off of for 80 million.
Yeah, so some insight I can give you into flying a jump freighter also for BLT is we are not usually filled up to the brink of our jump freighter. Sometimes you get it full with contracts, but more than often you're only filling up like half your jump freighter. And if then someone says, hey, I have a 10K cubic meter package that you maybe can hold on for me, I would say, okay, give me like 30, 50 million and I'll import it for you. If you're able to negotiate about the collateral, you can get that a bit lower. If you say, hey, I want this thing to be insured for me because I don't trust the other person, which you should not, then you might be looking at a bit higher fees. But still, if you're able to piggyback on someone, it's way cheaper than using standard BLT rates. So just be social. All right. Piggyback means that I don't know where that term comes from. In my head, I'm currently seeing a pig that you're riding on top like Minecraft style. It basically means that you're using someone else who is already doing anything anyway to just jump on top of the train and profit from that or make your stuff a bit easier. I should have just looked up Urban Dictionary. All right, but I think that explained it. Cool. Then I'll wrap up this class for now. If you have any further questions, you just send them to me on Slack, Rihan Shazih, or send them in Eve. I'll be seeing them there as well.